Tonight, we travel to the misty shores of the New World to uncover the quiet mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke. But first, come in, quickly now, away from the cold wind. The library is warm, the shadows here are friendly, and you are completely safe. Let your heavy eyes just relax. The chronicle for this mystery is waiting, a weathered journal, bound in rough leather, smelling of pine needles and old ink. Let us turn the worn cover. Our story begins. To understand the scale of this journey, we must first close our eyes and surrender to the rhythm of the Atlantic. For what feels like a lifetime, the world has been reduced to two simple, overwhelming elements: the grey, heaving expanse of the water and the fragile wooden shell of the ship. Imagine the sound of the timbers. It is not merely a noise, it is a language. The hull does not just float, it strains and flexes against the muscle of the ocean. There is a deep, rhythmic groaning of oak against oak, a low frequency vibration that travels up through the soles of your boots and settles into your very bones. It is the sound of the ship breathing. Every plank, soaked in brine and coated in tar, sings a song of resistance against the crushing weight of the deep. Sleep, in these weeks of crossing, has been a fitful companion. You lie in the narrow bunk, wrapped in wool that never quite feels dry. The air in the cabin is thick, heavy with the scent of burning tallow candles, old hemp rope, and the pervasive metallic tang of salt. Even in the dark, you can feel the ocean moving. It lifts the ship up slowly, agonizingly high, suspended for a heartbeat at the crest of a colossal wave, before sliding it down into the trough with a swooping sensation that leaves your stomach floating in your chest. Up and down, up and down. A cradle rocked by a giant hand. On deck, the sensory experience changes, but the intensity remains. The wind out here is not like the wind on land. It has no obstacles, no trees or hills to break its path. It howls through the rigging, snapping the canvas sails with a sound like a cracking whip. The spray is constant, a fine, cold mist that crusts your eyelashes with white crystals and makes your skin feel tight and weathered. If you were to run your tongue over your lips, you would taste the ancient ocean, sharp and biting. Time loses its meaning here. There are no landmarks to measure progress. There is only the endless horizon, a flat, indifferent line where the grey sky meets the grey water. The days bleed into one another, marked only by the changing of the watch and the ringing of the ship's bell, its clear tone swallowed instantly by the vastness of the Atlantic. But then, subtle as a shifting shadow, something changes. It happens first in the air. The wind, which has blown steadily from the east for weeks, begins to falter. It shifts, swirls, and then settles into a new pattern, blowing gently from the west, and it brings with it a message. Before you see the land, you smell it. Stand at the railing now, gripping the rough, weathered wood, and inhale deeply. The sharp, sterile acidity of the salt spray is cut by something warm, something complex. It is a scent that feels green and brown, a scent of life. It is the smell of cedar. It is unmistakable. It is the rich, resinous perfume of millions of needles warming in the sun. It smells of damp earth, of deep shade, of sap running through ancient veins. It is a smell so thick and sweet compared to the austere ocean that it feels almost intoxicating, like drinking a heavy, spiced wine. It speaks of forests that have never known the axe of soil cushioned by centuries of fallen leaves. You strain your eyes against the glare of the setting sun. The horizon is no longer a sharp line. It has thickened. It has become textured. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the form resolves itself. It is not a cloud. It is a jagged, dark silhouette rising from the water. The green. A murmur ripples through the crew. It is not a cheer. They are too weary, too awestruck for that. It is a collective exhale. The tension that has held the ship together for months seems to slacken. The ropes, though still taut, seem less desperate. The wood seems to stop groaning and start sighing. As the ship draws closer, the details emerge from the haze. You can see the individual tops of the trees, a jagged saw-tooth pattern against the sky. You can see the white line of foam where the waves meet the rocks, a boundary between the fluid and the solid. The water around the hull changes colour, shifting from the bottomless indigo of the deep ocean to a churning, vibrant emerald. The captain gives the order to shorten the sail. The great canvas sheets are furled, the snapping wind silenced. The ship glides now, carried only by its own momentum, drifting slowly into the shelter of a wide, welcoming bay. And then comes the sound that marks the end of the voyage. Clack, clack, clack. The heavy iron chain plays out through the hawse hole. It is a harsh, mechanical sound, violent and loud in the sudden quiet. Then the splash. A heavy, dull thud as the anchor pierces the surface and plummets down through the green water, dragging the weight of the journey with it. It bites into the sand below. The ship shudders once gently as the chain pulls taut, and then it stops. The cessation of movement is shocking. For months your body has been constantly adjusting to the roll and pitch of the deck. Now, the floor beneath your feet is solid, stable. The world has stopped spinning, but it is the silence that is most profound. Gone is the roar of the open ocean. Gone is the howling wind. Here in the embrace of the bay, the water only laps gently against the hull. A soft, rhythmic slap, 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 like a heartbeat slowing down to rest. Listen closely. Can you hear it? From the shore, sounds carry across the water with startling clarity. The cry of a gull, lonely and piercing. The rustle of wind in the branches of the conifers. The distant caw of a crow. The air here is still. The heavy scent of cedar has settled over the ship like a blanket. It is a quiet so deep, so profound, that it feels almost sacred. You are floating in a cathedral of water and wood, suspended between the memory of the violent sea and the promise of the silent forest. The journey is over. The waiting has begun. To understand this place, this strange and fragile ribbon of land, you must first look down, look past the wooden gunwales of the longboat as it glides away from the mothership. Look into the water. For months the ocean has been a dark, impenetrable abyss, a creature of fathomless depth that swallowed the light. But here, in these outer banks, the world has changed. The water is no longer indigo or black. It is a translucent, shimmering turquoise, so clear that it feels as though the boat is floating on air. As you lean over the side, trailing your fingers in the cool liquid, you can see the bottom. It is right there, deceptively close. Ripples of white sand form patterns on the seabed, sculpted by the tides into ridges that look like the backbone of some great buried leviathan. These are the shallows, the shoals. This is a geography of hesitation. The land here does not rise abruptly from the sea in cliffs of granite or chalk. Instead, it emerges shyly. It is a shifting, breathing landscape of sandbars and dunes that seem to drift with the wind. To the eye, it is a painting of horizontals, long, flat strokes of pale gold sand, sandwiched between the vast blue of the sky and the shifting aquamarine of the sound. The boat scrapes, a soft, gritty sound vibrating through the hull. You have found the shore. Stepping out of the boat requires a moment of reverence. You swing your legs over the side and lower yourself. Your boots do not find hard wood or cobblestone. They sink just an inch into the wet, packed sand. It yields to you. Walking up the beach, the sound of the ocean begins to change. The roar of the breakers on the windward side is muffled by the dunes, replaced by the soft hiss of wind blowing through the sea oats. The grasses are tall and dry, whispering against each other with a sound like hushed conversation. They bow and sway, golden brown against the blue, anchoring the sand, holding the island together against the eroding hunger of the sea. But you press inward, away from the exposed beach, toward the heart of the island, and here the sensation underfoot undergoes a profound transformation. You pass beneath the canopy of the live oaks and the towering cedars. The light changes instantly. The harsh, blinding glare of the sun reflecting off the water and sand is extinguished, replaced by a cool, dappled twilight. The air temperature drops, wrapping around your skin with a damp, earthy freshness. Take a step. Close your eyes and feel it. After months of jarring impact, the hard slap of boots on timber, the unyielding hardness of the deck, the ground here feels impossibly soft. It is a luxury. The floor of this primeval forest is thick with time. Centuries of pine needles have fallen here, layering one atop the other, weaving a dense, springy tapestry in shades of copper and bronze. It is like walking on a thick woolen blanket. Every step is silent. The earth absorbs the weight of your body, cushioning your stride. There is moss here too, great velvet patches of vibrant green that cling to the roots of the trees and spread across the shaded hollows. To kneel and touch it is to touch something ancient and patient. It is cool and damp against your fingertips, softer than the finest velvet from a Venetian merchant, holding the moisture of the morning dew long into the afternoon. The scent is overwhelming. In the heat of the sun-drenched beach, the air smelled of salt and dried kelp. Here, in the shade, the air is heavy with the perfume of the earth. It smells of decomposing leaves, a rich, dark musk. It smells of pine resin, sharp and cleansing, oozing from the rough bark of the trees. It smells of mushrooms and wet wood. It is a scent that fills the lungs and seems to slow the heart, a biological signal that you are safe, that you are sheltered. As you wander deeper, the day begins to surrender. The dappled light fades to grey, and then to the deep, velvety purple of true evening. The trees become silhouettes, silent sentinels watching over your encampment. A fire is struck. The crackle of the burning pine is loud in the quiet woods, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. And it is then, as you warm your hands near the flames, that you look up. In London, the night is never truly dark. It is a hazy yellow soup, choked with the smoke of 10,000 coal fires, the damp fog of the Thames and the lantern light of crowded streets. The stars there are distant, faint things struggling to pierce the veil of the city's breath. You might see the moon, pale and sickly, or perhaps the brightest wanderers like Venus, but the heavens are largely lost to the grime of industry. But here, the sky is a revelation. There is no smoke, there is no fog, there is only the crystal clear lens of the atmosphere, unpolluted and pristine. The sky is not black. It is a deep, deep violet, so dark it seems solid. And upon this canvas a hand has spilled a treasury of diamonds. The sheer density of the stars is disorienting. They are not scattered, they are crowded. They layer upon one another, stars behind stars behind stars, creating a depth of field that makes you feel as though you could fall upwards into the abyss. The constellations you thought you knew are transformed. Orion does not just hang in the sky, he burns. The stars of his belt are so brilliant they seem to pulse with a cold white fire. The North Star, the sailor's faithful guide, stands as a piercing beacon, sharper and clearer than you have ever seen it, and stretching across the zenith is the Milky Way. In the cities of the old world it is a myth, a faint smear rarely seen. Here it is a river, it is a torrent of ghostly light, a cloudy, luminous band that divides the heavens. It looks like steam rising from a celestial river, or dust kicked up by the chariots of gods. You can see the texture of it, the dark rifts and clouds of interstellar dust silhouetted against the glow of billions of distant suns. The air you breathe in as you gaze upward is biting and cold, sharpening your senses. The silence of the new world wraps around you, vast and indifferent. Under this dome of ancient light, standing on the soft floor of a silent forest, the memories of the crowded, noisy streets of London feel like a dream from a different life. You're a speck of dust on the edge of a vast, unknown continent, watched over by a million unblinking eyes. The island was quiet before we arrived, held in the trance of the wind and the waves. But now a new rhythm has been imposed upon the wilderness. To understand the birth of this colony, you must listen to the music of its making. It is a percussive, steady symphony of reconstruction. We found the bones of the old earthworks, the ghostly outline of a fort left by those who came before us. It was overgrown, the earthen ramparts softened by rain and time, the ditches filled with briars. We did not conquer this ground, we woke it up. Imagine the sound of the saw. It is the heartbeat of the morning. A long two-man saw, the steel blade tarnished but sharp, resting against the rough bark of a felled pine. It is a hypnotic, friction-heavy sound. The metal teeth bite into the wood, tearing through the fibres. You can hear the change in pitch as the blade sinks deeper, moving from the dry, flaky outer bark into the wet, dense heartwood. It sings a lower, tighter note as the wood grips the metal. And then the crack, the sudden sharp report of the timber giving way, followed by the heavy, shuddering thud as the log hits the sandy earth. The vibration travels through the ground, a tremor you feel in your knees more than you hear with your ears. Accompanying the saw is the hammer, not the sharp, ringing clash of iron on an anvil, but the dull, solid impact of iron on wood. It is a muffled sound, thump, thump, thump. We are driving heavy wooden pegs, trunnels, into the joints of the palisade. The mallet meets the peg, and the peg groans as it is forced into the hole, binding the logs together with a grip tighter than any rope. There is a meditative quality to this labour. The scrape of the spade shaping the earthen walls, the rustle of brush being cleared, the heavy, wet sound of mud being packed down to reinforce the ramparts. It is the sound of order being carved out of chaos, a sphere of structured noise pushing back the silence of the ancient forest. As the walls rise, so too does the scent. If the ocean smells of the past, of things ancient and dissolved, then the construction of our homes smells of the violent, vibrant present. The air within the fort is no longer salty. It is thick with the perfume of trauma inflicted upon the trees. We are building with green wood, timber that was standing alive only days ago, and it bleeds its life essence into the air. Inhale deeply. The scent is sharp, almost medicinal. It clears the sinuses and stings the back of the throat. It is the smell of turpentine and tannins. Every time an adze strikes a beam to square it off, a spray of wet chips flies into the air, releasing a fresh burst of pine. The sawdust is everywhere. It is not the dry, dusty powder of a seasoned carpenter's shop. It is damp and heavy. It clings to the sweat on your forearms, coating your skin in a fine, golden paste. It covers the ground in a soft, bright carpet that muffles your footsteps, turning the construction site into a hushed sanctuary. And then there is the resin, the sap. It oozes from the cut ends of the logs, forming perfect bead-like droplets that catch the sunlight like liquid amber. It is incredibly sticky, a stubborn bond that blackens your hands and glues your fingers together. If you touch it, it feels cool and viscous, warm only where the sun has struck it. It smells sweet, richer than the wood itself, a distilled concentration of the forest's soul. Walking among the skeletal frames of the houses, you are surrounded by this raw freshness. The pale yellow of the freshly cut wood stands out violently against the dark greens and browns of the background. These are the ribs of our new lives. The mortise and tenon joints fit together with a satisfying snugness, the wood still swollen with moisture. Touching the smooth, planed surface of a door frame, you can feel the dampness of the tree, the ghost of the water that once flowed from the roots to the needles. It feels cool, solid, and brimming with potential. The sun begins to dip below the tree line to the west. The sounds of the saw and the hammer fade away, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant rhythmic wash of the tide. The work is done for the day. The heavy gate of the palisade is swung shut. It moves on heavy iron hinges that have not yet rusted, groaning low and deep. The crossbar, a massive log of oak, is dropped into its cradle. Thunk. That sound is the most important sound of all. It is the sound of separation. Inside the palisade, the world changes. Outside, the forest is a wall of impenetrable black, teeming with the unknown, the eyes of wolves, the silence of the wilderness, the vast unmapped continent that stretches west to the other ocean. But inside, we have created a pocket of light. The central fire is built high, The driftwood and pine scraps catch quickly, sending flames leaping up toward the stars. The heat is radiant and intense. You stand close to it, turning your back to the flames to warm the chill that has settled between your shoulder blades. The heat soaks into your wool shirt, loosening the muscles that have been tight with labor all day. There is a profound sense of enclosure here. The palisade walls, standing tall and jagged against the night sky, are not just a physical barrier. They are a psychological embrace. The light of the fire dances against the logs, illuminating the rough bark and the tool marks, turning the wall into a flickering tapestry of gold and shadow. You are contained. You are held. The smoke from the fire rises in a straight grey column, disappearing into the darkness above. It carries the scent of burning pine, which mixes with the lingering smell of the roasted fish from supper. Looking around the circle of the firelight, you see the faces of the others. They are illuminated in flashes of orange and yellow. Eyes are heavy, lidded with exhaustion. Voices are low, mere murmurs that do not travel far beyond the fire pit. There is a shared quietness, a collective exhale. The wind picks up outside, rustling the tops of the trees that tower over the fort. You hear the branches clattering together, a chaotic, wild sound. But here, behind the wall, the air is still. The wind passes over you, broken by the palisade. You are in the eye of the storm, in the citadel of silence. For the first time in months, you feel the loosening of the knot of anxiety in your chest. The wooden walls are thin, fragile things against the might of the new world, but tonight they are enough. You wrap your cloak tighter around you, listening to the crackle of the embers, and feel the heavy, sweet weight of safety settling over your eyelids. The summer heat in August of the year 1587 is a physical weight. It hangs heavy and humid over the settlement, a thick blanket of air that smells of salt marsh and pine resin baking in the sun. But inside one particular cabin, the heat is forgotten. The world has shrunk down to the space of a single room, lit by the soft, wavering glow of beeswax candles. It is Sunday, the 18th day of the month. Outside, the colony holds its breath. The hammers have stopped. The saws are silent. Even the wind seems to pause in the branches of the live oaks, as if the island itself is listening. Then it comes, a sound never before heard on this side of the ocean by English ears. It is not the roar of a beast, nor the cry of a bird, nor the shout of a sailor. It is small, it is thin, it is a high, trembling wail that pierces the heavy silence of the room and drifts out through the cracks in the timber walls. It is the sound of new life. Inside the room, the air is thick with the scent of lavender and warm linen. Eleanor Dare lies exhausted, her skin sheened with the sweat of labor, but her eyes are wide, fixed on the small bundle wrapped in swaddling clothes. Virginia, They name her for the land itself. It is a name of hope, a declaration of permanence. To name a child after this wilderness is to claim it, to weave the blood of the settlers into the soil of the new world. Step closer to the cradle, carved from the rough wood of a local cedar. Look at the child. She is tiny, fragile against the backdrop of the vast, indifferent continent. Her skin is soft, untouched by the sun or the wind, a stark contrast to the weathered, leathery faces of the men standing guard outside. There is a profound peace in this moment. The anxiety of the voyage, the fear of the savages, the uncertainty of the coming winter, all of it is suspended. For now, there is only the rhythmic rise and fall of a tiny chest. There is the soft rustle of the blankets. There is the murmur of the women, their voices low and crooning, weaving the first lullaby ever sung in this strange land. It is a melody from home, a song of green English fields and stone cottages, now softening the rough edges of a wooden fort on a sandbar at the edge of the world. As the days drift forward from that miraculous birth, the rhythm of the colony shifts. The frantic urgency of construction settles into the steady, cyclical hum of daily survival. We are no longer just building a fort. We are living in a home. The mornings begin before the sun. In the grey pre-dawn light, the settlement smells of yeast and wood smoke. Come into the communal kitchen. The air here is warm and dry. On the heavy wooden table, dusted with a fine layer of white flour, the women are working the dough. Watch their hands. It is a hypnotic, repetitive dance. They press the heels of their palms into the pale, elastic mass, folding it over, pushing it down, turning it. Push, fold, turn. The dough is alive. It is warm to the touch, rising against the pressure of their fingers. It smells sour and sweet, the scent of fermentation that promises sustenance. They shape it into round loaves, dusting them with flour before sliding them into the clay ovens built into the hearth. Wait! Slowly the smell changes. The raw scent of yeast is replaced by the rich, nutty aroma of baking crust. It is a smell that triggers a primal memory of safety. It drifts through the open windows of the cabins, reaching the men working by the shore, a silent bell calling them to break their fast. The bread, when it is pulled from the oven, is hot and dense. Breaking it open releases a puff of steam, revealing the soft, airy crumb inside, protected by a hard, golden shell that crackles when you squeeze it. Down by the water, the rhythm is different, but equally meditative. Here, the men sit on overturned crates, the nets spread out across their knees like intricate fibrous webs. These nets have seen the deep ocean. They are stiff with dried salt, smelling of brine and old seaweed. The fibres are rough hemp, coarse against the fingertips. Listen to the sound of the mending. The wooden shuttles, carved smooth by years of use, dart in and out of the mesh. Swish, click, swish, click. It is the sound of repair. A hole in the net means a lost fish, and a lost fish means hunger. So the men work with painstaking care, finding the frayed ends where the cords has snapped, tying knots that are tight and permanent. Their hands are calloused, scarred by hooks and lines, but their movements are delicate. They are weaving the tools of their survival, loop by loop, knot by knot. The sun beats down on their backs, warming the wool of their shirts, while the water laps gently at the shore just feet away, promising a harvest for the nets once they are whole again. But life here is not just about the labour of the hands. It is about the relationship with the land, and the land, we are discovering, is not merely a fortress to be defended, but a garden to be harvested. Venture out beyond the palisade now. Leave the safety of the wood smoke and the sawed timber. Walk towards the edges of the forest, where the canopy breaks and the sunlight floods the undergrowth. Here, the world is draped in green. Vines, miles and miles of vines. Arthur Barlow, who scouted this land years ago, wrote that the grapes were so abundant that the very waves of the sea seemed to break over them. He was not exaggerating. The scuppernong and muscadine vines are ancient, thick as a man's wrist, twisting and climbing up the trunks of the cedars and oaks, draping from their branches like heavy living curtains. It is late summer, and the air here is sweet, almost cloying with the scent of ripening fruit. Reach out. The leaves are broad and rough, shielding the treasure beneath. Push them aside, and there they are, not the small, tight clusters of delicate French grapes, but great, globe-like berries. They are bronze and deep purple, glistening with a natural wax, warm from the afternoon sun. Pick one. The skin is thick, offering a resistance to your teeth. It snaps open with a sudden burst, flooding your mouth with juice. The taste is wild. It is not the refined, sugary sweetness of a cultivated garden. It is musky, tart, earthy. It tastes of the rain that fell on the island and the sandy soil that fed the roots. There is a seed inside, large and bitter if you bite it, reminding you that this fruit was not made for you, but for the birds and the forest floor. Gathering them is a sensory delight. Your hands become sticky with the sugar and the sap. The bees drone lazily around you, drunk on the fermentation of fallen fruit that lies fermenting in the heat on the ground. You fill your baskets, the heavy thud of the grape clusters piling up one by one. Carrying the harvest back to the fort, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in bruises of violet and orange, there is a sense of connection. We are no longer strangers scratching at the surface of this place. We are eating the fruit of the land. The juice of the new world runs in our veins, just as the blood of the settlers runs in the veins of the newborn Virginia. We are baking the grain we brought, catching the fish that swim in these waters, and gathering the wild gifts of the forest. For a brief, shining moment in the history of this island, there is a balance, there are plenty, and as the sun sets, casting long shadows over the palisade, the first lullaby rises again from the cabin, harmonizing with the whisper of the wind in the grapevines. The decision does not arrive like a lightning bolt, striking sudden and hot. It accumulates slowly like the gathering of grey clouds on the western horizon. It gathers in the hollows of the food barrels, which echo with a hollow wooden thud when tapped. It gathers in the rusting iron of the muskets, corroded by the salt air. It gathers in the eyes of the men who look not at the forest, but at the sea, their gazes hungry for a sail that never comes. Inside the governor's cabin, the air is stagnant. It smells of old ink and drying wax. John White sits at a table of rough-hewn pine, a singular candle sputtering in a pool of tallow to his left. The flame is weak, casting long, trembling shadows that stretch across the room like reaching fingers. Listen to the sound of the quill. Scritch, scratch, scritch. It is a dry, abrasive sound against the parchment. He is making a list. It is a terrifying inventory of absence. Salt. The word is written with a heavy hand. Powder, armor, paper, the necessities of civilization that are slowly bleeding away into the sand of Roanoke. He stops writing. The silence in the room is heavy, pressing against his eardrums. He looks up, not at the map on the wall, but through the open door into the next room. There, in the dim light, is the cradle. He can hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of Virginia, his granddaughter, barely 9 days old. The weight of the choice sits physically on his chest, a crushing pressure. To stay is to starve with them. To leave is to abandon them. The paradox tightens his throat. He runs a hand over his face, and the sound of his palm against his rough, unshaven beard is loud in the quiet room. His skin feels cold, clammy with the sweat of indecision, but the empty barrels speak louder than his heart. The decision settles over him like a heavy, wet cloak. He must go. He must cross the ocean of storms to bring back the lifeblood of the colony. The morning of the departure is draped in a mist that clings to the skin and dampens the wool of your cloak. It is a colourless dawn. The sky and the sea are woven together in a tapestry of pale slate and charcoal. The walk to the beach is a procession of ghosts. The sand is cold and damp underfoot, yielding with a soft, crunching sound that seems too loud in the hushed atmosphere. The entire colony has gathered at the water's edge. There are no speeches today. There are no trumpets. The air is too thick with unspoken fears for such things. The sensory details of this farewell are etched into the memory not by sight, but by touch and sound. It is the feeling of a hand grasping a forearm, the grip tight, desperate, the fingers digging into the muscle through the fabric of the sleeve. It is the texture of a cheek pressed against a cheek, rough stubble against soft skin, the dampness of a tear transferring from one face to another. It is the smell of the sea, which today does not smell fresh, but metallic and indifferent, swirling with the scent of wet wood and tar. John White stands by the longboat. He looks at Eleanor. He looks at the bundle in her arms. He does not speak, for his voice has deserted him. He simply reaches out and touches the blanket. The wool is coarse, but the warmth radiating from the child beneath is a burning heat against his cold fingertips. It is a tether, a lifeline he must physically sever. He steps into the boat. The wood shifts under his weight. The sailors, somber and silent, take their places. Then the sound that will haunt the dreams of those left behind begins. Creak, splash, creak, splash. The oars dip into the grey water. The heavy wooden shafts rotate in the oarlocks, groaning under the strain. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic beat. Creak, the pull of the wood. Splash, the bite of the blade into the sea. With every stroke the distance widens. The strip of water between the boat and the sand expands, growing from a stream to a river, from a river to a gulf. Those standing on the beach do not move. They are statues carved from salt and worry. They listen to the fading sound of the rowing. The splash becomes fainter, softer, a mere whisper of disturbed water. The distinct faces in the boat blur into pale ovals, then into indistinguishable shapes. The sound of the oars is eventually swallowed by the low, constant hiss of the surf breaking at their feet. John White climbs the ladder of the great ship, the Lion. He does not look at the rigging. He does not check the sails. He walks straight to the stern rail and grips it until his knuckles turn white. The anchor is weighed, a distant clatter of iron that sounds final and harsh. The canvas sails are unfurled, catching the wind with a heavy, muffled thump. The ship begins to move. From the shore, the ship is a mountain of wood and cloth. It dominates the horizon, a symbol of power and connection to the old world. But as the minutes stretch into hours, the perspective shifts cruelly. The great vessel shrinks. It becomes a toy, then a silhouette, then a speck. You stand on the dunes, squinting against the glare of the rising sun. The wind is picking up, blowing the sand around your boots in low, serpentine streams. You watch the white square of the sail. It is the last piece of England you will see. The ocean is vast. It is a terrifying expanse of rolling blue that seems to curve visibly away from you. The ship is climbing that curve, moving further and further over the rim of the world. And then there is the moment of disappearance. It does not happen all at once. First, the hull sinks below the line of the water. Then the lower sails. Finally, only the crow's nest and the very tip of the mainmast remain, a tiny defiant splinter against the sky, and then nothing. The horizon is an unbroken line, a perfect sharp edge where the water meets the air. It is in this moment that the true silence descends. It is not a silence of no noise. The wind still howls, the waves still crash, the gulls still cry. It is a silence of abandonment. It is a vacuum in the soul. The connection is broken. The bridge is burned. You are alone. The silence wraps around the island, heavy and suffocating. It presses in from the ocean, it seeps out of the forest. It creates a ringing in the ears. The vastness of the continent behind you, the thousands of miles of wilderness, suddenly feels heavier. The Atlantic in front of you feels wider. The settlers stand on the beach for a long time, staring at the empty place where the ship used to be. No one wants to be the first to turn their back on the ocean. To turn around is to admit the reality of their isolation. To turn around is to look into the forest, into the unknown, into the years of waiting that lie ahead. But eventually, the cold wind forces a movement, a shifting of feet, a pulling of cloaks. One by one, they turn. The sound of their boots trudging back up the dunes is slow and heavy, lacking the energy of the morning. Behind them, the ocean continues its eternal, rhythmic washing of the shore, erasing the footprints they left in the wet sand, wiping the slate clean, leaving no trace that anyone had ever stood there to say goodbye. The long, hot breath of summer, with its heavy, humid air and the cloying sweetness of wild grapes, begins its slow, reluctant retreat. It is not a sudden departure, but a gradual softening. The sun, which once blazed down with an unforgiving intensity, now casts a gentler, more golden light. The very quality of the air begins to change, losing its dense tropical stickiness and taking on a crisp, almost brittle edge. This transformation is first heralded by the wind. It whispers through the pines and the oaks with a different voice now. It is no longer the lazy, warm sigh of August. It carries a cooler, sharper note, a metallic tang that speaks of distant snows yet to come. It rustles through the dry grasses on the dunes with a sound like ancient parchment being turned. The sea oats, once vibrant green, have bleached to a pale, brittle gold, chattering together in the breeze. But it is in the forest that the true spectacle unfolds. This is a wilderness unlike the managed woods of England, where the seasons paint with a more restrained hand. Here, the autumn is a riot, a flamboyant farewell before the austerity of winter. Look at the trees, the broad, flat leaves of the oaks and maples, which for months formed an impenetrable canopy of deep, uniform green, are now undergoing a miraculous alchemy. The chlorophyll, the lifeblood of summer, begins to drain away, revealing the hidden pigments beneath. Fingers of brilliant scarlet creep along the edges of the maple leaves, deepening to a fiery crimson. The oaks, more stoic, turn through shades of russet and deep burnished bronze, and amongst them the vibrant, almost shocking, gold of the poplars glows like captive sunlight. The forest becomes a tapestry, woven with threads of every imaginable hue, from the palest lemon to the deepest blood orange. The ground beneath your feet changes too. It is no longer just the springy carpet of pine needles and moss. Now it is covered in a fresh, rustling layer of fallen leaves. To walk through the woods is to walk through a soft, crackling sea of colour. Every step sends a soft crunch through the silence, a gentle echo of the dying year. The air smells different now too. It is sweeter, heavier, saturated with the earthy perfume of decaying leaves and the sharp, clean scent of pine resin. This is the scent of nature turning inward, preparing for slumber. Sometimes a low mist will roll in from the sea in the mornings, clinging to the branches, softening the vibrant colours of the leaves to muted watercolour tones. The wooden cabins of the settlement, nestled within the turning forest, seem to huddle closer, their smoke rising in thin, vertical lines into the cool, clear air, a silent acknowledgement of the approaching cold. To understand the nature of this silence, you must first understand the nature of the waiting. For the first few months, the horizon was a source of anxiety. Every morning, as the sun bleached the sky from charcoal to pale blue, eyes would strain against the glare, scanning the line where the water meets the air. Every whitecap was a sail, every low cloud was a hull. The heart would leap, a sudden, painful flutter in the chest, only to sink again as the illusion dissolved into foam and mist. But time, like the tides, wears down the sharp edges of expectation. The anxiety has faded now, replaced by a dull, heavy acceptance. It is a quiet surrender. The horizon is no longer a door that might open. It is a wall, a vast, blue, impenetrable wall of water. The Atlantic Ocean does not connect them to the old world anymore. It insulates them from it. Stand on the beach now. The wind is constant, a physical pressure against your chest. It carries the sound of the waves, that eternal, rhythmic crashing that never stops, never sleeps. Whoosh, crash, whoosh, crash. It is a sound so continuous it has become silent. It is the heartbeat of their isolation. The ships are not coming. The realization does not come with a scream, but with a sigh. It settles over the colony like the evening fog. The memories of London, the cobbles, the church bells, the crowded taverns, begin to feel dreamlike, thin and insubstantial compared to the visceral reality of the sand and the pine. The England they knew is a ghost story, a whisper from a life that belongs to someone else. Here there is only the here and now. There is only the vast indifferent sky and the waiting earth. The cord has been cut. They are floating, untethered, in a sea of silence. As the hope of the ships fades, something else begins to happen, a transformation, a merging. Look closely at the people moving through the settlement. They are changing. The stark boundary that once separated the civilized English from the wild forest is dissolving. The velvet doublets and stiff linen collars of their arrival are gone or altered beyond recognition. The fabric has surrendered to the elements. The vibrant reds and deep blues of their dyes have been softened by the sun and the salt air, faded into muted, earthy tones that blend seamlessly with the bark of the trees and the dry grass of the dunes. Patches of deerskin, cured with smoke and animal brains, replace the worn wool. The rough, organic texture of the hide sits against the skin, a tactile reminder that they are wearing the forest now. The change is etched into their bodies too. The pale, protected skin of the city dweller is gone. Their faces are weathered, mapped by the wind and the sun, turned a deep, rich bronze. Their hands are rougher, calloused by the axe and the net, ingrained with the soil of the new world. But the deepest change is in the way they move. Watch a man walking towards the tree line. He does not stomp or march with the heavy, arrogant bootfall of a soldier claiming territory. He moves softly. He places his feet with care, rolling from heel to toe to stifle the sound of the dry leaves. He has learned the language of the woods. He knows that silence is survival. He stops often, head tilted, listening not for the town crier, but for the snap of a twig, the call of a jay, the rustle of a deer. The smell of the colony has shifted. The sharp, foreign scent of gunpowder and vinegar has dissipated, carried away by the breeze. In its place is the smell of the land itself, the settlers' smell of wood smoke, of drying tobacco leaves, of pine resin and bear grease. They have absorbed the sensory signature of the island. They are no longer foreign bodies rejected by the landscape. They are becoming another layer of the ecosystem, as natural and inevitable as the moss on the oak trees. And so, when the decision is finally made, it is not born of panic. It is a calm, pragmatic choice. The resources here are thin, the soil is sandy and reluctant, but the friends they have made, the people of the CROATOAN, have offered a different path. There is no shouting, no chaotic scrambling to pack. The departure is methodical. It is the closing of a book. Walk with them to the center of the settlement. The fire has been allowed to die down to a bed of grey ash. The tools that are too heavy to carry, the small cannons, the bars of iron and lead, are not left to rust. They are buried. Listen to the sound of the spade cutting into the earth. Thud. The sand is moved aside, creating a grave, not for a body, but for a past life. The heavy iron is lowered into the cool, dark ground, covered over and smoothed down. The earth swallows the evidence of their struggle. And then the final message. A man stands before a massive live oak tree near the entrance of the palisade. The bark of the tree is thick, deeply furrowed, tough as armor. He draws a knife. The blade is steel, worn but sharp. He places the tip of the knife against the wood. Scritch. He presses down. The steel bites into the tree. He carves slowly, deliberately. He strips away the dark, rough outer bark to reveal the pale, fresh wood beneath. It shines in the dappled light like bone. The curve of the letter is smooth. The sap begins to bead at the edges of the cut. Sticky and fragrant, a tear of amber weeping from the tree. Ah, oh, he is not carving a plea for help. There is no cross, the agreed-upon sign of distress. This is not a message of terror. It is a signpost, a breadcrumb left for the ghosts. A T. The sound of the carving is intimate, a rasping friction that seems loud in the quiet grove. Skirt, skirt, O-A-N. He steps back. The word stands out, stark and bright against the shadowed trunk. CROATOAN. It is a name, a destination, a promise. The wind picks up, rustling the leaves overhead, casting shifting shadows across the fresh letters. The settlement is empty now. The hearths are cold. The doors are left unlatched, swinging gently in the breeze with a lonely creak. The people turn their backs on the fort, on the buried iron, on the ocean that brought them here. They shoulder their packs, the leather creaking softly. They walk into the embrace of the forest, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of pine needles, moving deeper into the green silence, disappearing into the waiting world, leaving only the word on the tree to whisper their story to the coming centuries. Time behaves differently at sea than it does on land. On land, time is measured in the growth of a child, the height of the corn, the greying of a beard. But at sea, time is a void. It is a gap between 2 points of existence. For John White, that gap has lasted 3 years. It is August of the year 1590. 3 years of waiting in the plush, velvet-draped anterooms of courts. 3 years of staring at the grey waters of the English Channel, knowing that on the other side of the world, his daughter and his granddaughter are waiting. 3 years of the Spanish Armada, of wars and politics that turned the ocean into a forbidden zone. But now the waiting is over. The Hopewell and the Moonlight ride the swell off the coast of the Barrier Islands. Close your eyes and feel the tension on the deck. The air here is identical to the air of the arrival years ago. That same humid, heavy blanket of salt and heat. But the mood is inverted. There is no cheer. There is no triumphant pointing at the shore. The ship rolls heavily in the choppy surf. The anchor chain rattles down, a harsh metallic cough that echoes across the water. But listen to what follows the sound. Silence. White stands at the railing, his hands gripping the wood so tightly that splinters dig into his palms. He is older now. The salt air stings lines in his face that were not there when he left. He raises a spyglass to his deccan eye. The brass is cool against his cheek, smelling faintly of oil and verdigris. He scans the tree line. He is looking for one thing, one specific vital sign of human presence. Smoke. In the wilderness, smoke is the flag of civilization. It is the signal of the hearth, of bread baking, of warmth, of life. He sweeps the glass slowly from north to south. He sees the tops of the cedars swaying in the wind. He sees the white flash of gull wings. He sees the endless rolling dunes. But the sky above the trees is painfully, terrifyingly clear. It is a perfect, unblemished blue. There is no grey smudge, there is no rising column. The air above the settlement is empty. The journey from the ship to the shore is a torture of slow motion. The longboat is lowered, hitting the water with a slap that sounds like a gunshot in the quiet morning. The oarsmen pull, their backs heaving, but to White the boat seems to be standing still, trapped in a nightmare of viscosity. As the keel grinds into the sand, the silence of the island rises up to meet them. It is not a peaceful silence, it is a heavy, brooding stillness. It feels like a room where an argument has just ended, and the air is still vibrating with the tension. White steps out of the boat. His boots sink into the wet sand. He remembers this sand. He remembers the footprints of the colonists he left behind, but the tide has washed the beach clean 1,000 times since then. The canvas of the shore is blank. He orders the trumpeter to sound a call. Watch the man raise the instrument. The sun glints off the battered brass. He fills his lungs and blows. Ta-da, ta-da-da-da. The sound is shocking. It is a bright, jagged tear in the fabric of the morning. It is an English sound, a martial sound, a sound of order and announcement. It blasts through the dunes, cutting through the sound of the surf, travelling over the ridge and into the forest beyond. They wait. The notes hang in the air, vibrating for a moment, and then they die. Everyone on the beach holds their breath. They are listening for a shout, a dog barking, the crack of a musket in reply, a child's cry. But the island simply absorbs the sound. The trees do not answer. The dunes do not speak. The silence rushes back in, louder and heavier than before, filling the space where the trumpet blast had been. It is a silence that says, "You are late." They move inland, up the familiar path, but the path is fighting them. Nature is a jealous guardian, and in 3 years she has been busy reclaiming her territory. Where there was once a beaten track packed hard by leather boots, there is now a tangle of briars. The sandspurs catch at their stockings. The sea oats have grown tall and wild, whipping against their waists with a dry, hissing sound. They reach the site of the settlement, and here the melancholy settles over them like a physical weight, a damp, cold fog that chills the marrow. The houses are gone, the carefully constructed cabins, the thatched roofs, the chimneys, dismantled. But it is not a scene of war. There are no charred timbers, no scattered bones, no smell of violence. It is a scene of orderly retreat, followed by the slow, chaotic invasion of the forest. The palisade still stands, the great wall of logs they built to keep the world out. But the world has broken in. Walk with White as he steps through the gap in the wall. The sensory details of abandonment are overwhelming. The smell is the first thing. It is the smell of damp rot. It is the scent of wet wood that has never been allowed to dry. It is the smell of fungus and deep, dark soil. The sharp, clean scent of pine resin is gone, replaced by the musk of decay. Vines are everywhere. They are the new tenants of Roanoke. Thick, muscular creepers wrap around the standing posts of the palisade, squeezing them in a green embrace. They drape across the open spaces like tattered curtains. Morning glory flowers, purple and white, bloom with an ironic, vibrant beauty amidst the desolation. White stumbles over something in the high grass. He kneels, pushing aside the wet green fronds of a fern. It is a bar of iron, a pig of lead, and nearby the heavy iron shot for a cannon. Touch the surface of the iron. It is rough, flaky. The salt air has eaten into it, covering it in a thick, orange crust of rust. It comes away on his fingers, a powdery red dust. These were the heavy things, the valuable things. To leave them behind means the departure was final. They are slowly sinking into the earth, being swallowed by the sand. Further on, he finds a chest. It has been dug up, perhaps by natives, perhaps by animals, and left open to the rain. The wood is soft and spongy, falling apart at the touch. Inside, the remains of books and maps have turned into a grey, pulpy mash. The ink has run, the words of history and science dissolved back into formless grey stains. Armour, once polished and bright, lies scattered and corroded, the steel pitted and brown, looking less like protection and more like the shed skin of some metallic beast. The silence inside the fort is profound. It is a cathedral of absence. The wind moves through the tops of the trees overhead, but down here, protected by the walls and the vines, the air is still and heavy. White stands in the center of the enclosure, where his own house once stood. There is nothing but grass and a young cedar tree, perhaps 3 years old, growing straight and tall from the spot where his hearth would have been. He closes his eyes. He tries to hear the ghost of a lullaby, the cry of a baby, the laughter of his daughter. But there is only the buzzing of a fly and the rustle of a lizard skittering over a rusted breastplate. The forest has not just taken space, it has erased the time. The colony has been digested. The wilderness has healed the wound they made, leaving only a scar of rust and silence to mark where they had been. The governor has returned, but his kingdom is dust. There is a specific quality to the silence of a place that has been abandoned. It is not the empty silence of a desert, nor the hushed silence of a library. It is a silence that feels attentive. It is a silence that holds a secret. John White stands at the entrance to the palisade. The great wooden posts, once bright with the sap of fresh-cut pine, have turned a ghostly silver grey. They are bearded with moss now, the green velvet creeping up from the damp earth, softening the hard lines of the fortification. He steps closer to the right side of the entrance. There, on one of the main posts, a trunk of a tree that was old when the first ship broke the horizon. Something disrupts the natural texture of the bark. The sun is high overhead, filtering through the canopy of the encroaching forest, casting dappled shadows that dance and shift across the wood. He reaches out. His hand, trembling slightly, brushes aside a hanging vine of ivy. The leaves are cool and waxy, resisting his touch before snapping away. Underneath, the wood has been wounded, but it is not the jagged scar of a lightning strike or the claw mark of a bear. It is deliberate. It is language. He traces the grooves with his thumb. The wood within the cuts has darkened over the last 3 years, weathering to a deep, rich brown that stands out against the grey surface. The bark is rough, crumbling slightly under the pad of his finger, but the channel of the letter is smooth. See, he follows the curve. It is deep. Whoever carved this did not do so in a panic. They did not slash at the wood with a shaking hand while looking over their shoulder at an approaching enemy. They stood here, feet planted specifically in the sand, and drove the knife in with purpose. R.O. The letters are tall. Fair Roman letters, he calls them in his mind. They are the letters of an educated hand, precise and geometric. They speak of civilization asserting itself one last time against the wilderness. A-T-O-A-N. He steps back. The word hangs there suspended in the humid air. CROATOAN. His eyes dart frantically around the carving. He looks above the word. He looks below it. He drops to his knees, sweeping away the dead leaves and the sand at the base of the post, searching for one specific symbol. Before he left 3 years ago, there was a pact a secret language agreed upon in the dark of the night. If they were forced to leave by distress, if they were fleeing from hunger or fire or the violence of the savages, they were to carve across. A simple intersection of two lines, a sign of suffering. He stares at the wood. He runs his hands over the bark until his skin is raw. There is no cross. The wood is smooth of any such mark. There is only the word standing bold and unaccompanied. The silence of the missing cross is louder than the roar of the ocean behind him. It implies agency. It implies a choice. They did not run. They moved. He turns away from the post and walks deeper into the enclosure. He moves with the slow, heavy tread of a man walking through a dream. He is looking for the story of their departure, written in the landscape. If there had been a battle, the earth would remember. Violent death leaves a chaotic signature. There would be the charred stumps of burned palisades, smelling of carbon and tragedy. There would be shattered timbers, the splintered remains of doors kicked in. There would be the scattered, sun-bleached whiteness of bones, left where they fell. But the ground here is peaceful. It is disturbingly tidy. The houses have not been burned. They have been unmade. The heavy timbers are gone, likely carried away to build new shelters elsewhere or repurposed. The footprint of the settlement remains, ghost squares of packed earth where the floors once were, now carpeted in a thin layer of wind-blown sand and pine needles. He moves toward the area near the trench, a defensive ditch they had dug years ago. The earth here has been disturbed, but not recently. It is a soft depression in the ground, covered in a tangle of weeds. He kneels again. The smell here is potent, the scent of damp, anaerobic soil, the musk of the underground. He sees the remains of the chests he found earlier. This discovery is a double-edged sword. On one hand, the sight is heartbreaking. The chests were buried, hidden away for safekeeping, intended to be retrieved. But they have been found by others first. Perhaps the natives, perhaps the curious claws of a foraging bear. The wood of the chests has rotted, turning soft and spongy like wet bread. The iron bands that bound them have rusted into fragile ribbons of orange oxide, and the contents. He picks up a handful of what used to be paper. It feels cold and slimy. These were his books, his maps, the drawings of the flowers and the people of this new world. They have dissolved into a grey, formless pulp. The ink has bled away, the knowledge returning to the elements. A cover of a volume, leather-bound and embossed, hangs limply in his hand, smelling of mildew and time. But look past the ruin. Look at the intent. You do not bury your heavy goods if you are being slaughtered. You do not take the time to dig a trench, to lower heavy trunks of books and armor into the earth, and to cover them with care if arrows are flying and fires are burning. Burial is an act of hope. It is a promise to return. It is a sign that the departure was orderly, planned, and executed with the belief that this location was still theirs. A vault to hold their treasures until they could come back for them. The atmosphere in the clearing shifts. The oppressive, heavy dread that sat on White's chest begins to fracture. The absence of bodies, the absence of ash, the absence of the cross. It all weaves together into a tapestry of survival. He stands up, wiping the grave soil from his hands onto his breeches. He looks around the clearing one last time. The wind sighs through the branches of the live oaks, a long, sustained hush. It rattles the dry fronds of the palms. For the first time since landing, the sound does not feel like a mockery. It feels like a whisper of direction. CROATOAN. He knows this name. It is not a random word, it is a place. An island to the south, the home of Manteo, their friend, the baptized lord of the region. It is a place of allies. The geography in his mind rearranges itself. The map, which had been a blank void of terror, now has a pin in it. They are not lost in the infinite expanse of the continent. They are just elsewhere. He turns to face the south. The air flowing from that direction feels different on his face. It feels warmer. It carries the scent of the salt marsh and the distant, unseen smoke of cooking fires. A strange sensation washes over him. It is not quite joy. It is too fragile, too jagged for that. It is a desperate, clawing relief. The silence of the fort is no longer the silence of a tomb. It is the silence of a vacant room, the occupants having merely moved to a better house. He looks at the sailors waiting nervously by the boat. Their faces are pale, their hands twitching towards their weapons. They see a haunted ruin. White sees a signpost. He breathes in deep. The air tastes of pine and rot, but also of possibility. He nods once to the empty clearing. He understands the message in the bark. It is an invitation to follow. The story did not end here in the shadows of the dark trees. It simply moved into the light of the southern sun. To the boat, he whispers, his voice cracking with the weight of the new hope. They are not here, they are waiting. The promise of the carved tree was a seed of hope, planted in the fertile soil of John White's desperation. But the Atlantic Ocean is a jealous god, and it does not give up its secrets willingly. Just as the heart begins to lift, the sky begins to fall. It starts not with a roar, but with a colour. The brilliant, hard blue of the morning sky bruises. It deepens to a sickly violet, then to the colour of a fresh bruise, and finally to a churning, impenetrable charcoal. The wind, which had been a helpful hand pushing them toward CROATOAN, turns traitor. It shifts. It stiffens. It begins to scream, to understand. The cruelty of this moment You must feel the physical sensation of the ship. The Hopewell is no longer a vessel, it is a cork tossed in a washing tub. The deck pitches violently, knocking men from their feet. The timbers scream in protest, a high-pitched keening of wood under torture. They are so close. The island of CROATOAN is a mere dark smudge on the horizon, a few hours of sailing away. It is right there. You can almost smell the fires of the village. You can almost imagine the embrace of the lost ones. But the water rises up like a wall. The waves are not just water, they are hammers of liquid lead. They strike the hull with a deafening boom that reverberates in the teeth. Spray flies across the deck, not as a mist, but as shrapnel, stinging the skin and blinding the eyes. The taste in the mouth is pure salt and bile, and then the sound of the severance. The ship is anchored, fighting to hold its position against the gale. The cable is a thick rope of hemp, taut as a bowstring, vibrating with the tension. It sings a low, deadly note. Snap. It is a sound like a cannon shot. The cable parts. The ship, suddenly untethered, lurches sickeningly to the side. The loss of the anchor is not just a mechanical failure. It is the loss of their foothold. They are losing their grip on the world. The captain's voice is barely audible over the howling wind, but his decision is absolute. To stay is to wreck. To stay is to die on the shoals. They have lost their anchors. They have lost their fresh water in the chaos. The food is running low. John White stands at the stern. The rain is lashing his face, mixing with the salt spray so that he cannot tell which is the ocean and which is his own weeping. He looks back toward the south. The grey curtain of the storm has dropped completely. The horizon is gone. CROATOAN is gone. The ship turns its bow away from the land. The sails catch the gale, and they are flung out into the deep, cold Atlantic. There is no slow wave of goodbye this time. There is only the violent rushing of the wind and the terrifying speed of their retreat. He is being ripped away, clawing at the air, leaving his heart behind in the mist. The storm has slammed the door and the lock has clicked shut. The ships disappear. The sails fade. The European history books close the chapter, marking it with a question mark and the word lost. But listen closely to the whisper of the years that follow. History is not only written in ink, it is written in blood and bone. Decades pass, the seasons turn, winter frost giving way to the heavy yellow pollen of spring. Over and over again, the palisade at Roanoke rots and returns to the earth. The iron guns rust into orange dust. But the people are not so easily erased. Travel forward in time, move through the swamps and the cypress forests of the mainland, sit by the fire of the Hatteras people, the descendants of the CROATOAN. Look at the faces in the circle of the firelight, among the dark brown eyes of the elders, you see something that makes you pause. It is a flash of the ocean. There are eyes here that are pale grey, eyes that are piercing blue, eyes that carry the genetic memory of the Suffolk sky. Look at the hair of the children playing by the river. It is not the jet black straight silk of the pure Algonquian bloodline. There are strands of auburn. There are waves of chestnut brown. There is a texture that speaks of two worlds colliding and weaving together. And listen to the language. As the years grind on, travellers and settlers who come later, a century later, will stop and tilt their heads in confusion. They hear words that do not belong. In the cadence of the native tongue, there are ghosts of Old English. Words used for book, for math, for talk. They are archaic, fossilized remnants of Elizabethan speech, preserved in the amber of the tribe's dialect. They are not learned from books. They are learned at the knee, passed down from grandmothers who remembered a time when men came from the sea in wooden clouds. The lost colony was never truly lost. It was absorbed. It was a drop of ink falling into a glass of water. The distinct shape disappeared, yes, but the water was forever changed, tinted by the essence of what entered it. They did not die in the dark woods. They learned to weave nets from the local hemp. They learned to pound corn into meal. They learned to walk softly on the leaves. They shed their heavy wool and their stiff collars, and they put on the deer skin. They became the land. Now, let the centuries dissolve completely. Let us return to the island of Roanoke as it is today, in the eternal now. The mystery has become an industry for some, a tragedy for others, but for the island itself it is nothing. The land does not mourn, the land simply is. Walk the perimeter of the island in the twilight. The physical sensation of the place has not changed since the day the first keel scraped the sand. The air is still heavy and sweet, carrying that complex perfume of rotting kelp, pine needles, and damp earth. The Spanish moss still hangs from the limbs of the ancient live oaks like the grey, tattered beards of sleeping giants. It sways gently in the breeze, a slow, hypnotic pendulum, marking time in a place where time has no meaning. Stand where the fort once stood. The earthworks are reconstructed, a shadow of the past, but the ground beneath them is the same. It is quiet here. It is not the scary silence of the horror story. It is the peaceful silence of resolution. The tragedy has been metabolized by the earth. The fear of the settlers, the crying of the infants, the desperate hope of the governor, it has all seeped down into the sand and been filtered by the rain. What remains is the sound. Close your eyes and listen. The waves of the sound lap against the shore. It is a gentle, rhythmic washing. It is the sound of a mother smoothing a sheet. It is the sound of a page turning. Whoosh. This is the only witness that remains. This water touched the hull of the lion. It touched the boots of John White. It touched the fishing nets of the CROATOAN. It carries the molecules of the past in its foam. The mist rolls in from the sound, wrapping the trees in a soft white gauze. In the swirling fog, you might fancy you see a shape, a woman carrying a child, a man with a matchlock musket. But when you look directly, there is only the trunk of a cedar and the flight of a heron. There are no ghosts here, screaming for vengeance. There is only the wind whispering through the needles of the pines, telling the same story it has told for 400 years. And so the mist returns to the forest, and the secret remains kept. We close the weathered journal, smoothing down the leather. The mystery is finished, and the past is at rest. You are safe here, tucked away in the warmth. The questions have faded, and now there is only silence and peace. You can let go if you found comfort in the quiet tonight. Stay here with us. Return to the library tomorrow. But for now, just drift. Sleep. Good night.